In today's show, how much is Yusuf Nurkic going to get paid in free agency? What about Anfernee Simons, and what does the free agent market tell us about the Blazers' off-season plans? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazer reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Blazers your first listen every single day. It's free on all platforms, 5 days a week. So come join us and tell your friends to do the same. Make it part of your daily routine and make it your first listen every single day. Today's show, we're going to talk about a little bit about free agency. John Hollinger over at The Athletic released his the first part of his annual projections of player production as salary figures. It's what he calls Borgs. It's his big old rating system with a dollar sign, and it is a projection of what players are worth based on what they will produce just in the next season. It is not a projection of what they will make in the open market. It is not a projection of like what contract they will command. It is a projection of what their on-court production would translated into dollars. Basketball ability translated into dollars. And it's a pretty interesting look kind of at what's, at what his sort of advanced look, his statistical look suggests guys will produce at, and what that production means financially. Blazers got a couple interesting free agents, and I think it's worth considering Hollinger's numbers. Subscribe to The Athletic. It's available on there. Shout out to John Hollinger, former Portland resident and a longtime executive of the Memphis Grizzlies. We're going to use his numbers as kind of a lens to look into the sort of free agent class, and also just to talk about the Blazers offseason in general, and to break up a little draft monotony, quite frankly, because we've had a lot of draft stuff. We got a lot of draft stuff on the horizon. So let's switch it up a little bit on this wonderful Thursday show. This is Thursday, June 9th show. Appreciate you listening. There are 25 names on this list. Hollinger's going to release, a couple of these, it looks like, based on what he's done in the past and based on what he wrote today. But the first 25 names on the list, and the first name that appears on that list is at number 12. In Tier 4, this is the max guys up top, names you expect: James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Zach LaVine, Brad Beal. Those guys look like they will produce at a level that is commensurate with getting a max contract, even if paying James Harden, if giving him a max contract seems dicey, and giving long-term money to Kyrie Irving seems dicey. Their play next year, they look like max-type producers, and if the Blazers were to make a run for a Zach LaVine type or a Brad Beal type, they project to be worth max-type money because they're really good basketball players. But the first Blazers name on the list is unrestricted free agent Yusuf Nurkic. He's at 12th on this list, and he is in the fourth tier. It's like the max guys, the sort of next crew of folks, and then the weirdos. We need to get into Hollinger's whole thing, but tier 4, the 12th pick, Yusuf Nurkic, projected based on the Borgs rating to be his production worth $17.4 million. And I think this is pretty similar to what I would guess Yusuf Nurkic will command on the open market. Again, the Borgs number is not is not projecting what the salary will be, and you'll see that when we get to Anfernee Simons in a moment. It's what the production will be. And I think this is about right for Nurk, right? Like if starters in the league, good starters in the league make around $20 million, but there's like a slight reduction because centers are slightly less valuable. This is what Nurk is. He's an above average center who's been like consistently, when he's been on the court, when he's been able to on the court, consistently an above average center. Like he's a good basketball player, even despite his limitations. And his biggest limitations is just health stuff. He is behind guys. Mitchell Robinson is 11th, just other centers on the list that are projected to be more productive value wise than Nurk. Mitchell Robinson at 11th. Chris Boucher at eighth, a target that many folks from in my email inbox want the Blazers to target. He's eighth on the list, on the board's list, and DeAndre Ayton, fifth, and he is just a shade below the max guys. He's right below max production, or at least projected to be right below max production. I think DeAndre Ayton's going to end up signing a max contract. The question is, where is he going to sign a max contract? But the Nurk money, I think, is intriguing and interesting because Nurk at $17 million, again, this is not a projection of the market value, but that seems about right. And the question is, like, would you pay Nurk, 4 for 68 to be, a long-term center? He's young enough that this is probably his last chance to get a really big payday on the open market. $17 million a year would be a raise. If he starts in like that 15 with raises, that would be a raise over. He's making about $12 million a year now, and I think it would be a relatively fair contract. But it suggests that the other names on the market, like Mitchell Robinson, might make more money than Nurk. It'll be pretty interesting. I think Nurk is just straight up better than Mitchell Robinson. DeAndre Ayton's a lot better than Nurk, but he's in a weird spot, and he's also younger than Nurk. I would say Chris Boucher is not better than Nurk. He's a weird basketball player who's he's kind of a stretch five, but he doesn't really shoot it that well, and he's not really a five. He's just a big, long guy who can rebound and block shots. He's really a fascinating player. Hollinger points out that he's been really productive for the Raptors, but they are really good at using weird players. They're the best team in the league, maybe, at maximizing weird types of players. Nurk is so when you're thinking about Nurk heading into free agency, I think there's a couple things. One, I think he's the player most likely to not be on the team. I think Ant is a lock to come back. Close to a lock. I would put Ant somewhere at the 90% chance that he returns, 92.5% chance that he returns. And Nurk's a little bit lower. Nurk is in the high 70s, 78, 79, 80, roughly, very, very likely to return. But he's a more likely sign and trade candidate just because the Blazers aren't going to give up on Ant. I don't think they want him to develop because since he's happy birthday, Anfernee Simons just turned 23 as I'm recording this. And Nurk would be more valuable in a sort of the bigger sign and trade type of things. Nurk is the guy to leave. So if you're signing a productive center in the teens, Nurk seems like a good deal. And the other players that, at least Hollinger's numbers project, he is about equal value to a guy like Mitch Rob. So if you're choosing between Mitchell Robinson and Nurk, they're just very different players, right? Mitch Rob is a vertical athlete who can't pass, and Nurk is a ground-bound athlete who has some really intriguing passing skills. They're very different basketball players. Nurk is a really good sort of pick and roll partner, and Mitch Rob is just a straight rim runner. They're depends on what you want. But I think this is something to consider when you're considering what Nurk might want, and the Blazers can give Nurk more years and bigger raises. The raises are the real thing. They're not going to give Nurk a 5-year contract, but the Blazers can give Nurk bigger raises, so thus they can give him a bigger contract than other players. Is that it's the Mitchell Robinsons, the Chris Bouchers are the sort of the centers that are going to be right in that tier along with Yusuf Nurkic, and that's who you are bidding against. So when you're watching kind of trade ideas and salary projections for those folks, that's probably about the level of player in Nurk's tier. Ayton is clearly a couple steps above. Anfernee Simons is a curious one. His name's all the way down at 23 on this list. 23. While Nurk is 12th, he's going to be one of the good free agents available on the market, and that's it speaks to how weak the free agent class is to some extent, but you would think I think here in this market, we would think Anfernee Simons' name would be way the hell up the list. He's at 23rd. 23, I guess how you say that number. Let's talk about why Ant is at 23 and why I think he's going to get paid a whole lot more than the John Hollinger Borg system suggests. But first, let me tell you about RockAuto.com. Family business, been serving auto part customers for over 20 years, helping do-it-yourselfers take care of your auto part needs, helping you save time and helping you save money, real money. 30, 50, or even 100% more than when you go to a chain auto parts store or the car dealership. They can't carry all the parts you need. If they do carry the parts you need, they're going to be more expensive than Rock Auto. So don't waste your time going there. Instead, just head to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and then write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? That way they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right. So Yusuf Nurkic's number based on John Hollinger's salary projection sounds about right. I think Nurkic's going to make right in that 15, 16, 17, 18 million a year range. And I think that's about what he's worth. Worth is a weird word to talk about. I think that's about what he'll make. Nurk is a pretty productive player. When he's on the court, he's been crucial for the Blazers being an average defense. He kind of props them up. He's been a great pick and roll partner with Dame and Ant. But there is a question about how much teams maybe should pay for centers. The Blazers, if they let Nurk walk, they don't magically get it. Letting Nurk leave is the path to how they get cap space, but there's more to it than that. They'd have to sacrifice too much. So Nurk coming back seems very, very likely. I think Nurk much more likely to leave via sign and trade than he is where the Blazers just let him go and create cap space and chase after Zach LaVine's or Brad Beal's. And the reason that they might not do that, the reason I do not think they will do that, is because they have a pretty darn good shooting guard entering free agency. His name's Anfernee Simons. Just turned 23 today. Happy birthday again to Ant. But if you're looking at John Hollinger's article right here on The Athletic, you got to scroll way the hell down there to get to Anfernee Simons' name. He's 23rd on the list of 25 names. These are players that are, the way Hollinger did it, who are going to command more, or not command more, who project to be more valuable than the taxpayer mid-level exception, or the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is about $10.3 million. Anfernee Simons, based on the Borg score, $11.5 million is what the Borg's numbers think his production will be worth. Anfernee Simons might get double that. I don't think Anfernee going to get over 20, but I think 20 million is really, really reasonable. Like, I think he might get 4 for 80. I think it's very possible. I think that might be high, but it's going to be a lot higher than this 11.5. Some other names that are ahead of Anfernee Simons on the John Hollinger list include DeLon Wright, Tyus Jones, Cody Martin. That's the Martin twin who's in Charlotte. Right behind Ant in terms of production, Pat Connaughton, in terms of, or projected value is what I'm going to use from now on. Projected value. Patrick Bergen Connaughton, Patty Fastball at 24, and Colin Sexton at 25. Very, very curious that Colin Sexton is behind Anfernee Simons. I think those two are fascinating restricted free agents heading out on the market. Sexton just has been more productive than Ant, like larger body of work to say, really, really productive basketball player, but I think Ant's peaks have been higher than Sexton's peaks. Ant's peaks have been very brief. And one of the reasons that the Borg score is so low, the projected value so low on Ant, is because the numbers suggest that he's just a really, really bad defensive player. A really, really bad defensive player. I mean, you can watch it also with your eyeballs. You don't need advanced stats. You don't need calculator stuff to watch him. Watch him closely. He's bad on defense. That's just real. Like he doesn't navigate screens well. He gets caught up in screens. He doesn't use his physical tools particularly well on defense right now. And until a real breakout in January, February this year, he was a really low level playmaker. And then something clicked in the middle of January. And in January and February, he just like really took off. And he was averaging like 30 and 6 for a brief period. Like when it clicked for Ant, it clicked, the light came on bright and the fire burned pretty darn hot. So what you're betting on here, if you're betting on what Anfernee Simons is going to, what he might be paid, is like, if you're betting 20 million, you say that February was real as hell and I believe it. And if you're maybe hedging a little bit, you say, okay, 20 million's a little high. What about, 18, 17 million a year starting with your 8% raises, because you just don't have this massive body of work. Ant's going to come back. Like, I think it's, like I said, a lock, like over 90% lock to come back, just because the gymnastics that the Blazers would have to do to get big name free agents, those big name free agents play Anfernee Simons' position. Unless you really believe that Bradley Beal is such a massive upgrade over Ant that it propels you into championship level status, all of the gymnastics you have to do to get rid of folks and add Beal to the mix doesn't seem worth it. Add Zach LaVine to the mix does not seem worth it to me, from my perspective, because you get rid of your traded player exceptions, you get rid of your mid-level exception, like you create cap space, and then you add an expensive guard. You can just pay a promising young 23-year-old guard here. I think Anfernee Simons and Colin Sexton's paydays are two of the most interesting deals that will be on the market. Will the Blazers bid against themselves and pay Ant a whole bunch of money, and he'll play himself right into that contract and maybe be better than it quickly? Or will Colin Sexton set the market and Ant's people say, I mean, listen, we all think, everyone in the room thinks that Ant's going to be better than Colin Sexton, or projects to be better than Colin Sexton is, without some of the injury concerns. Go ahead and cut the check. I think that's super. I think that is super fascinating. But I will say this: the number here from Hollinger strikes me as not close to the sort of perceived open market value. He's going to make a whole bunch more money than that, but it might speak to interest in Ant around the league outside of people, you, dear listener, who's listening to this, Trailblazers podcast in early June when the team hasn't played in a long time. Like, I think the perception of Ant, and not just, this isn't Hollinger, he watches a shit ton of basketball, but like the perception of Ant to maybe outside of this market is much lower than it is within this market. Like, I think this is a really good sort of, indicator of what value means for Anfernee Simons. I find it truly fascinating. Ant's going to come back. He's going to get a pay raise. Like, this is just off-season fodder, but it strikes me as curious. There's two other names in this list that I think really come up, and they speak to the value that Joe Cronin has pursued while seemingly stripping this team of a lot of talent. Let's talk about those two names, two veterans who seem to be friends in that third segment. But first, let me tell you about Built Bar. It's the best protein bar on the market. My personal favorite, peanut butter brownie. But if you go right now to Built.com, they got a new banger on there. A new just wonderful flavor. Peanut butter brownie. Caramel brownie. It's the cousin of my personal favorite peanut butter brownie. I haven't tried caramel brownie, but it looks pretty good on the website. Still packing 17 grams of protein, still covered in 100% chocolate, still as delicious and packing a punch, just like all of the Built Bars I love and I think you'll love too. So go check them out, see the flavors you like, and save some money while you're shopping. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Still a pass first point guard, still Mike Richman. You are still listening to Locked on Blazers. We're still talking Blazers free agents and their value. I think Nurk right in that 16-17 range. I think Anfernee Simons right in that 18 plus range. But there's two names that stood out to me on the list, on John Hollinger's list. These were guys who are not going to be free agents or are, in Joe Ingles' case, injured. So they're not going to command their full value because of an injury. The Blazers traded for Joe Ingles, and I thought for sure this was just like financial filler. Then he hung around the team. He came to Portland. He's done rehab here in Portland. He spent time rehabbing his ACL in Portland before he went back to Australia. The Blazers sent medical staff with him, so they were with him. So Jessica Cohen was with him when he got his ACL surgery. They are treating him like a player on the roster in a way. Very specifically, they are not treating Eric Bledsoe. Wasn't around the team. Isn't like, retweeted by the social media team. Is not like, he's just not. You could see the two difference in veterans they acquired at the deadline. Eric Bledsoe, they held out because he had some Achilles issues, and he kind of and they let him go. Not let him go, but they didn't ask him to spend time around the team because they didn't see him as a future part of the team. Ingles, they immediately treated him as part of the team, and I straight up did not see that coming. He's 34 years old, coming off his, a down season, and then he tore his ACL at the end of that season where he was struggling. John Hollinger's Borg score has him worth projected value, $14.8 million, more valuable than Anfernee Simons next year based on this. Playmaking, a little bit of defense, a little bit of size, better rebounder. Sheesh. I wouldn't have seen that. Obviously, I don't think Joe Ingles is going to get $15 million. But I think there is a chance that the Blazers sign him to something like a $10 million deal so he can be traded. I do think they sign him to, because they have his bird rights, because they can go over the salary cap. I think they wait deep into free agency, and if he is amenable to it, and I think that's why they're treating him right and treating him like a player, because, if he's healthy and gets right and he can help, he's 2 years ago, Joe Ingles would have been freaking awesome for this basketball team. A dude who shoots like 45% on walk-up threes, like can run pick and rolls and is big. Like that's the real value for the Blazers there if you get that version of Joe Ingles. And if you don't, I think signing him to like a $10 or $12 million contract that is tradable at the trade deadline, it seems like a very likely scenario, first pointed out to me by a friend of the program, Eric Griffith, a very likely thing for Joe Ingles. I think that's just, it's interesting to me that his production is valued so highly by this statistical model, because to me, he seems like a guy that in another world would sign a minimum contract just based on his health and his age and all of those things. But I think for the Blazers' purposes, they might end up signing him to a larger, more tradable contract because it would give them a little more ammo at the trade deadline. And maybe, you do right by, you treat people the right way, so it gives you options to maybe treat them like assets a little bit later on, is what I'm trying to say. The other name on this list, Josh Hart. Projected production, projected value, $16.5 million. Josh Hart is on a value contract. It's, fully non-guaranteed, late guarantee date at the end of June. It's a little over $12 million. Same deal next year, basically the same price, same like fully non-guaranteed deal. He is on a team-friendly deal, and according to Hollinger's numbers, his production will outperform what he's getting paid. And what's the secret to building a good team in the NBA? Underpaying good players. That's how you got to do it. You have to have people that play better than their contracts. And Josh Hart projects as someone who could play better than his contract. It's a little bit tricky with Hart because he's a 2. So is Anfernee Simons. Or if Simons is a 1, Damian Lillard is a 1. Like you're running 3 guard lineups, something that Chauncey Billups straight up hated doing this year. He hated how small the roster was. It drove him crazy. He was forced into it by the way it worked, and then by the time he kind of found more size, they gave him 4 games before they shut the team down. And so I don't think Josh Hart is a candidate to start at small forward. It seems very, very unlikely. But he's a candidate to play a whole bunch of minutes. They like him and they want him to play, and he is better than the money he's getting paid. He can really help. This is the curious thing about what Joe Cronin did. He traded away a bunch of players that were useful, like Robert Covington and Norman Powell and Larry Nance Jr., and a really good player in C.J. McCollum, for seemingly not much for Josh Hart and a 2025 pick and Justice Winslow. And Justice Winslow is, he's a back half of the rotation guy and maybe out of the rotation on really good teams. I'm not sure. I watched the NBA Finals tonight. Not sure he gets on the court in that game, it is what it is. It's high level basketball. Cronin maybe has some more value than I have given him credit for. I don't think Josh Hart projecting to play $4 million ahead of his contract or 30% better than his contract. I don't think that's something Cronin doesn't deserve a gold star, but I think it's worth noting. And if Ingles is in any way productive or becomes a tradable part of the deadline, then it kind of changes the way you look at those series of trades, right? If the sort of transitive property of transactions is probably unfair, but I think it would change the way I overall view it if come February, Joe Ingles has turned into something valuable that helps the Blazers, the next iteration of the Blazers, be competitive. That would certainly change my opinion. And based on sort of these advanced numbers from Hollinger, the sort of financial analytics from Hollinger, which you can go read on The Athletic, kind of how his methodology and how he got there and how he's changed the way he projects these numbers year over year. Like, yeah, according to all that, Cronin maybe found some value in the back half of the roster that I haven't given him credit for. It's really not going to change my opinion too much, but I thought it's worth noting because for the most part, I'm like, okay, we'll see. I applaud taking a big swing while noting you can strike out, but I also will note, seems like there's been a lot of striking out that has happened. All right, tomorrow's show, we're back talking Blazers draft stuff. Got a fun interview lined up. Haven't confirmed it yet, but come back because I'm almost certain it's going to be here. If not, we'll still be talking draft stuff regardless, but it's either going to be Friday or Monday show, talking sort of insights into how the Blazers approach the draft season. I think it's going to be a whole bunch of fun. Don't miss that one. Next week, Yahoo's Kristen Peak is going to join to talk about the Blazers and their draft process. Someone who covers amateur basketball at all levels with wonderful insight. Don't miss that interview. We got fun stuff. Sean Woodley of Locked On Raptors is going to join the show next week. We're going to talk a little about OG Anunoby. We got fun shows lined up 5 days a week, available wherever you get podcasts. Come back and listen. Tell your friends to do the same. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.